the lengths to which people will go to try to win, to try to bring you down.
What's your track record? And that's what it should come down to in this election, because Kamala Harris's track record, we know what it is over the last 3.5 years. All of a sudden you say you care. It's an American concern, and she continues to try to divide. I think so often the Democrats believe that black men and women, especially younger, are too stupid or lazy to do their homework.
I couldn't do it. I was physically ill thinking about not practicing what I preach.
Right.
Hello. No, I can't dance. I mean, I'm half black, but I have no rhythm. I'm sorry. I'm not going to start dancing, and then it'll go on the, okay? That was funny, right? It's okay. It's okay. How is everybody? Oh my gosh, I can't tell you. I am so excited and, number one, honored to be here. So, we'll talk later. Stop. That's twice from you. Okay, the timer's going. And no, I had 20, not 17 minutes. I'm going to take it. Okay, guys. Such an honor, and I'm starting with a question for you. Not one that you necessarily have to answer out loud unless you want to, but what is your biggest fear? Yes, that too. Communism counts. Personally, I want you to think about it for the next 20 minutes and hopefully forever, because fear affects everything in our lives, and that's what I've learned. I will be honest with you, I've lived in fear my entire life. And I'm not afraid to talk about it now, because pushing through some of those fears has actually changed my life, and I feel like if I don't share those fears, what a waste, right? I'm going to focus just on the last 3 years, though, because that's when it's been, I think, the most evident. Starting in September of 2021, I was in my 15th year at ESPN, which was my dream job since I was 11 years old. Said I wanted to be a sportscaster, and the dream was ESPN, and I did it. And I loved, honestly, I loved every moment. The problem is, in September of 21, if you recall where we were as a country at that time, that little COVID thing. And ESPN is owned by who? Disney. Disney owns ESPN and ABC. And Disney put out a mandate that by September 30th, 2021, if you were not vaccinated, you would be fired. You would not have a job. Unfortunately, Disney was not alone, and many companies chose to do that to their employees, even when you look at the US military. A lot of things that we got to fix, and I know we're going to. But at that moment, I knew that I had a decision to make. I was the mother, still am the mother of 3 college-age kids, 100% financially responsible for all my kids, their father as well, so the pressure was real. So when we talk about fear, to stand up for something you didn't believe in, being forced to take a vaccine, that fear is real. I believe that. Yes, we have choices, but the fear is real. I had been told by friends, listen, get a medical exemption, you can do that. And I said, well, but there isn't a medical issue, I just think it's wrong. I don't want to have to lie. Well, get a religious exemption. Okay, fine, I have a very strong faith, but it has nothing to do with my religion. This is just wrong to force me to do something to my body that I am not comfortable with, period. That's all there is to it. I like the my body, my choice when it's convenient for them, correct? Yeah, it's cute. So, unfortunately, that is a decision that I had to make, and thought about it and prayed about it and knew I couldn't lie, and knew that I needed a job that I needed and a job that I loved. So I made an appointment at the grocery store to go get a shot because I needed to keep my job. And I prayed about it the entire time. When I sat in that parking lot before I went in, disgusted with myself because I felt like I was caving in. But I felt like I had no choice. They gave us no choice. I walked in that grocery store, and I'll never forget this moment. I sat down in the chair in the little pharmacy, and my eyes were red, and the nurse, a wonderful woman, looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm being forced to do something to my body that I think is wrong. And I have no choice." And I was crying, and she looked at me, and she grabbed my hand, this complete stranger, and said, "This is so wrong, and I am so sorry." And at that moment, she put the needle in my arm. I'd like to think there was I just told myself there was water in it. This was a fake one. And I felt, I changed forever at that moment when I realized that I was forced to give up control of my body for something that was an experiment. But I felt at that moment I had no choice. I've beaten myself up for years because I felt like I caved. In that moment, I did what I felt was right for my family, period. But I changed. Previously planned that day, I had a podcast with former Bears and Broncos quarterback Jay Cutler. You may have heard of him. I did a lot of his terrible highlights on SportsCenter through the years. Sorry, Jay. Did a podcast with him previously planned, and literally went from the parking lot at the grocery store to my laptop to do the Zoom. Didn't even think about the Band-Aid on my arm from getting the shot. And he asked me during the show, what's that? First he said, hey, can we talk about the vaccine? I know you've been outspoken. I said, absolutely, let's go, it's fine. And I answered the question when he said, what is that, and did you take it? And I was, again, so disgusted with myself, and I said, yes, I did. And I said, listen, I just think it's sick and scary for any employer to force their employees to do something to their body. I said, but I work for a global company, Disney, and I understand it because that's what they're all doing, but I think it's sick and scary. And we moved on. When the podcast posted about 2 weeks later, needless to say, it blew up. It blew up on social media for other things I said that were apparently controversial as well, but this was the main focus of my employers, is that I whacked the company, was the word. I complied. And there's actually a law in Connecticut that we found out later, ESPN based in Connecticut, that if you are complying with the rules of your company, you can say what you want, but you must comply. They didn't know that. We did, thanks to the attorney I ended up hiring later. But that's a few minutes ahead. Hold that thought. I learned a lot through this process. The bosses called, my agent called first and said, there's a problem. This is not going over well with Disney. And they said, wait for the call from your boss. And when he called, he said, listen, love ya, but you ticked off the wrong people with your comments about the vaccine. I said, I complied. He said, I don't care. And told me that they were going to suspend me, take me off the air for indefinite amount of time. It ended up being about 13 days, paid suspension, as well as make me do a public apology. And I fought it. And they said, if you don't, I said, what am I apologizing for? I followed their rules. But I was afraid because they said if I didn't apologize, I'd be out of a job. The fear continued to build. So what did I do? I gave in with this because I was afraid. I gave the public apology because I was afraid they'd take my job because they said that they would. While I was suspended, it was the definition of canceled by everybody in the media, even people that were friends. I use that in air quotes now. And that was definitely the darkest time of my life. And then I got really sick with COVID, of course, to the point where for 8 days I was alone in my home. My kids had gone to their father's house. I was alone and couldn't be around anybody. And my heart was jumping out of my chest for 24 straight hours. My heart would not stop going crazy. And I thought, this is because of the vax. And so I got up and I went to take a shower after 3 days and to take myself to the hospital. And when I stood up, I fell over. I couldn't move. I had nothing, no energy, no food, nothing. And I realized that if I fell over again and hit my head, that no one would find me. So I'm canceled, I'm sick, after they told me I wouldn't get sick if I did that, and I had nothing. Eventually, I was allowed to go back to work. I was told that my peers were upset with me, that they didn't want to be teammates with me, they didn't want to work with me. Some said it publicly. And so my bosses instilled more fear, and I listened to it, and I thought, wait, I've been the best teammate. I've done everything you've asked for 15 years at the highest level while being a mother, while doing all these things. And you're threatening me and saying my teammates don't want to work with me? It just kept building, and I didn't know what to do. When I finally went back to work, my parents had come up. My dad has 2 kinds of cancer. My dad wasn't supposed to be around me. I'd been sick. The vax, all of those things. My parents came up and lifted their 50-year-old little girl off the ground and said, you're going to do this. And when I was walking back into work that day for the first time after my suspension, again, fear, scared to death. My dad, the former Army football player and football coach, said, huddle up. It's always about sports in my house. It was me, my mom, and my best friend was my makeup artist who really had a lot to fix on my face that day, and we huddled up. And I'm Catholic, and he recited the prayer, St. Michael the Archangel, protect us. This prayer I'll never forget. Part of it says, protect us from the wickedness and snares of the devil. And it hit me so hard that day. And every single day from that moment in October of 2021, when I was allowed back to work, to the day I left ESPN in August of 2023, I would drive to work, I'd call my mom and dad, we'd say that prayer. And at least for the next 2 hours in that building, doing the job that I loved, I felt like I had a protective bubble around myself. It felt so good because I knew it was bigger than me. God was going to protect me during that moment. So the fear The fear began to dissipate slowly but surely. The problem is during that time, I witnessed my peers saying whatever they wanted about Roe versus Wade being overturned and how devastated they were, and they talked about the women's right to abortion on an NBA show. And then we talked about the alleged Don't Say Gay bill in the state of Florida on football shows. And we gave moments of silence during women's college basketball tournaments for what was allegedly happening in Florida, which we all know those words were never even in any of those laws in the state of Florida, but they didn't want to do their homework, didn't want to be journalists and do their homework. Instead, they spread fear. And I saw that my friends, my peers at ESPN, on airwaves were talking about stuff that had nothing to do with sports. I was on an off day, giving my opinion on a vaccine that I took that you made me take. I complied. And I'm suspended and punished, and you're taking all my assignments away. I was the host of the Rose Parade in Pasadena, the New York City Marathon, things I'd worked my life for. I was ready to move on. Just don't take my assignments and allow my peers to do exactly what you told me I couldn't do. I needed consistency. That's all we need. I have 3 kids. Consistency. They might not like your rules, but be consistent. And my bosses were inconsistent. It'd been years of this, and I called an attorney. My dear friend Chris Harrison, the former host of The Bachelor, he is the one that saw what was happening. He was canceled. He was brought down. Our attorney, Brian Friedman, saved Chris. Brian Friedman also, Megyn Kelly's attorney, who came to Megyn Kelly's rescue when NBC did what they did to her. And look at Megyn Kelly right now, the most powerful journalist on the planet with Tucker Carlson and Charlie Kirk. Look at what she's done. And he said, young lady, you've been wronged. And this is going to be big. This is going to be scary. More fear, more fear. Take it on Disney. This is truly David versus Goliath, and it was. They could bleed me dry in 5 minutes financially, and they tried. But I knew that I was done being told to be fearful, done being told to not be me when everybody else was allowed to be. My daughter's high school in Connecticut, the little girl, she was a girl one day, a boy the next, and the cat on Thursday. We're okay with that. But I can't be a conservative. I can't have opinions. While following your rules, I'm done. So my attorney, we got the lawsuit ready to sue the company that I loved, my childhood dream. The night before the lawsuit dropped, I went to each one of my kids separately. One was a freshman in college, the other 2 were in high school, and I said, guys, this is what's happening tomorrow. I want to apologize because I know that this affects you. Through the years, every time I said something that made some people mad, they'd go after my kids. And they threatened to rape my daughters on social media. They wished me death. The level that people go to just because you have a different opinion is disgusting, and I will never delete those comments because we need to remember what people are about at times and call them out. But I wanted to apologize to my children for what was about to come. And each one, took it differently, and I said, so when a coach or a teacher or anybody says something to you about your mother, which had happened in the past, number 1, tell them to come to me. Number 2, remind them what diversity of thought means, and that you might not agree with your mother, but she has that right. And if they have a problem again, Mama Bear will come out, I will cut you. Don't mess with my kids. So my son, who's 20 now, he was 17, 18 at the time, my precious son between my 2 psycho daughters, I love them, they're crazy. And my son, I said, buddy, I'm so sorry, but I've got your back and I have to stand up. My son looked at me and he said, Mom, it's about time you stood up for yourself. So, at that moment I knew, no matter what happened, no matter how much more money I lost, no matter what was said about me, about my company and my peers and the media and strangers, that I was already going to win. Because this whole time my kids have been watching me what? Shrink and get smaller and live in fear. To try to protect them, that was the reason. But what was I teaching them to do? The opposite of what I was preaching them. So I knew at that moment I was going to be okay no matter the result. 3 weeks later, I was back to work, right? I'm doing my thing. I'm pretending like I'm not suing the company while I'm on their TV screen. And I was at the PGA Championship in Southern Hills, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Southern Hills, a beautiful club. And I had just gotten off the air with my favorite co-host, Matt Berry. And we were walking the course, and I was way, way, way in the left fairway. I've been to many golf courses, covered 7 Masters. I know how to be on a golf course. And the craziest thing in the world happened. Long story short, I turned from 280 yards away. We're following the best groups. Scotty Scheffler, pretty good golfer, Colin Morikawa, and John Rahm, the best golfers in the world. We wanted to follow that group. And as I stood behind a tree from 280 yards away, I've never felt or heard a sound like this. 150 miles an hour, the ball, direct shot onto my mouth. It hit my mouth so hard that it ricocheted back into the middle of the fairway. I was next to a tree. They thought it hit a tree, and then until they looked at me, and I had blood pouring out of my hands. I don't know how I didn't pass out. Most importantly, I don't know how I survived, other than God, because hitting the ball in the face with a ball at 150 miles an hour, if it had been an inch higher, if I'd been looking at my phone for a second, then it takes out my orbital bone, my eye, my temple, I'm dead. So I only lost 8 teeth and had 3 root canals. But my smile's back. If anyone gets hit in the face, I have a great dentist in Canton, Connecticut, okay? I got you. I'm sitting there, and I was alive, I was okay, and they were trying to avoid the cameras seeing my bloody hands. And so I was hiding behind a tree, and when I was kneeling down there's a picture online I'll never forget over my mouth, the blood dripping out, the voices that I heard, the darkest voices I'd ever heard in my life. Literally, like the angel devil on this shoulder, I heard someone saying, that's what you get. That's what you get. Because think about it, my mouth is what got me in trouble. Speaking up and being true to myself. Of all places for a ball to hit me from 280 yards away at 150 miles an hour in my mouth, I said, I'm done. And I said, God, I'm so sorry. I'll stop. I'll be quiet. I'll drop the lawsuit. I'll do whatever it takes. I hear you. This is why they say be quiet. Like, I got it. And then I was on the stretcher, and I went to the hospital, and then the other voice was like, okay, no, because you're still standing. You're alive right now for a reason. It took a while. But I believe in good and evil. If you believe in good, you got to believe in evil. And I believe that there was something evil and dark trying to penetrate me. When I was on the ground, I knew my peers, the liberal media, our friends, all the people that had crushed me and canceled me before were like, see, that's what she gets. And it actually happened. I was sent the articles. It actually happened. But that moment changed me, and I knew that I was absolutely here for a reason. Fast forward, I went back to work 20 days later, like an idiot, because I was afraid that my bosses and my peers would think I was milking it, even though I couldn't talk, and every time I did talk with my fake teeth, I was spitting on everybody. So fortunately, you can't feel that through the TV screen, but it was a disaster. I still did my I wanted to prove I'm tough. I wanted to have nobody ask questions. And I just kept going, despite the advice from my attorney and everybody else to just stop, and it's okay. On August 14, 2023, my case against Disney settled. Out of court. I take that as a victory. The reason, this was a free speech. This was a First Amendment lawsuit. That's what this was. This wasn't about treating me wrong because I was a good employee for all those years. This was about being inconsistent and telling people, we love you, we respect you, we've got you. Until what? Until you don't fit into their box. And I knew somehow or another I'd be okay. I'd get another job, I'd find another way to get a paycheck. But what about the hundreds of people who would come up to me, even in the office, people I worked with who were just afraid to speak and say thank you? How about at the airports? It happens to me all the time now. And there have been questions when the transition after almost 30 years in corporate media, the job that I loved, went away. But every time I'm realized that's why I did it. What a waste if I have this platform that I'm too afraid to use. I told you, I've been fearful my entire life. And finally, when you keep getting knocked down, but then are able to wake up the next morning and do it, you realize this is so much bigger than me. What a waste if I don't use this platform. And that was a scary day on August 14, 2023, but it was the biggest blessing. 7 months later, I started my new show, Sage Steele Show, and I've had such a blast just having conversations with people. From Dana White, who's my dear friend, even if I call him the wrong name, my Dana White, to RFK Jr., to Nicole Shanahan, to Sharon Osbourne, to Aries Spears, to Mayim Bialik, who's super liberal, and she took a chance and came to talk to me anyway. We have conversations, isn't that what's been missing in our country for all these years? Conversations. I was afraid, though, too, to be too political, not give my opinions, because what happens then, right? Well, then you're going to be tagged as a right-wing nut job. And you know what? I noticed that every single time I gave my opinion, and those on my show did, controversial topics, Michael Rappaport, who was very far left and ended up voting for Donald Trump because of what the Biden administration did not do with Israel. Like, when you look at the facts, it's easy. And I realized that every time someone spoke up and gave our true opinion, the numbers, your views, your likes go up because we're all desperate just for truth and just for people to be their authentic selves. Through my show, I got to interview Laura Trump. What a blessing. What a powerhouse of a woman. I mean, I'm obsessed with her, and I don't think that people truly understand the difference that she and Michael Whatley, as the RNC co-chairs, made in this country. They saved this country. They knew what was happening in the background. They knew what was happening in Georgia and in Pennsylvania and Arizona and all these places that were cheating and trying to do it again just like 2020. And they knew, and they got out ahead of it, and they crushed it. And it was an honor to stand next to her with our sexy pink jackets on the campaign trail, et cetera. It was incredible. And then they called and said, do you want to come on the tour with us and put on those jackets and support and be a surrogate? And I said, hell yes, I do. After all the years of fear, I'm like, this is me. I have to, again, I'm telling my kids and other college kids that I speak to be true to themselves, that I'm too afraid. So when I posted that first picture with Danica in the pink jacket and with Laura, it was scary. And I got a lot of hate, a lot of blocking people on Instagram. But what happened? There was so much more positivity. And every time you push through that fear, what happens? It's a little easier the next time. That led to being asked to moderate a couple of panels, a couple of town halls with J.D. Vance in Reading, Pennsylvania, and then with Donald Trump in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I want to tell you that when I was on that stage with Donald Trump, I was like, what has happened to my life? Like, this is the most amazing thing and the biggest blessing. And I've talked to presidents before. I've done so many amazing interviews and on big stages, and that obviously was the biggest thing. And I will admit, one more fear. I'm on that stage in front of 5,000 strong in Lancaster and Pennsylvania. Thank you. You did an incredible job. Thank you, Pennsylvania. Thank you, Scotty Pressler. Thank you to everybody who had that courage to go in that state and do what they did. And when I sat on that stage with Donald Trump, I thought, oh my goodness, this is the most vulnerable I've ever been in my life. This is a couple months after Butler, Pennsylvania. I look down, I see Secret Service everywhere, and I go, wow, this is scary. And then I look to my right, 2 feet to my right, and who's sitting there? You talk about fear. They tried to kill him more than once. They've tried to imprison him. And every single time, what did he do? He stood taller. He stood stronger. He pushed through. He's amazing, but he's human. You don't think there was some fear in there after what happened in Butler? After what happened on his own property in Florida? If that man's going to push through his fears, who am I to continue to be fearful to talk about my beliefs with our country and what we need? He's taking all the risks. He didn't have to do any of this. It would have been smarter, safer, cheaper for him to just stay on one of his many properties and on his golf courses and do his thing and be there for Kai, his beautiful young granddaughter. But he has chosen to do this because he cares, because he has pushed through his fears. You talk about being vilified and hated. It's a beautiful thing to watch. If Donald Trump can push through his fear and do this for us, what fears are we going to push through? So think about those fears that you have. It's okay. We all have them. I was scared to come up here, and I've done this 10,000 times. I'm still fearful, right? You're not going to be liked. It's not going to be enough. It's bigger than us. This man did this for us. I'm going to end on this because this is a prayer that saved me my entire life, that my dad had me and my brothers memorize as kids. My dad went to West Point, 23-year Army career, retired Army colonel. We had to salute doing room inspections every Saturday. No more of that. And this is what he taught us. Part of the cadet prayer. Help me to choose the harder right instead of the easier wrong, and never to be content with a half-truth when the whole can be won. The harder right versus the easier wrong. It is easier to stay silent. It's easier to take the shot and comply. It's easier to just not have the conversation at the Thanksgiving dinner table. It's easier. What's the right thing? You can do it with kindness. You can be kind about it. Know your facts. But it's the right thing. And not just for ourselves, but for our children and for our neighbors and for people that you'll never meet. You have no idea. And I know just by being here, many of you had to push through a lot of fear and had to have tough conversations with family members and friends. And you probably lost friendships like I have and bosses. But you're here. And the beauty of pushing through is that then you realize you're also not alone. Danica mentioned it before. It's a family. This is an incredible family. What a blessing to be part of it. And I'm so proud of all of us for pushing through our fears and choosing the harder right instead of the easier wrong. And never again can we be content with a half-truth, because now we know that the whole truth can be one, because on November 5th, it was. God bless you.